There we go. And is it through my Yeti? Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me? Let's see. It looks like we've got some muted.
Yes.
Okay, there we go. Yay. Hello, Larissa. Hello,
Hi.
Arrow. How are you?
Good. Long time no
Good.
see.
Yes, I know. It's been a little while. And we have Kathleen. So welcome. How can well, and I should say welcome to the first official Ask Me Anything Live. I just came in from pouring down rain. I have 2 kids at home, and my hubby, who's supposed to be here, is not. So we'll see how the kids do. How are you guys? How can I help? Arrow, good to see you again. It's been I think since the JVology in Calgary.
Yeah.
2 falls ago, right?
Yes.
Yes. Well, good to see you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. You too.
Yeah.
Heather, I'm sorry. I just want to say I like your hat.
You know what? Thank you. This is my vacation hat, and sometimes I put it on just to feel fun. So who wants to go first? If you've got a question, I'd love for you to jump in and see if I can give you some support. I'm going to open the chat just in case we have anybody joining that needs to pop questions into the chat because they can't go live.
I have a question, but other people were here before me, so I just wanted to defer to them first.
Thank you. Arrow, do you have a question that I can help?
I have a few. I was going to hold back too, but sure, I'll jump in. So
jump in.
I purchased I guess I have to gather my thoughts around what it is I purchased. It was more the IP package.
Was it the website protection package?
I think
no,
was it joint ventures and the
okay, let me go look.
The Contractor.
Yep, I'll log into Infusionsoft with you.
Contractor agreements and joint venture partnerships, IP protection.
Got it. So let me go.
Yeah.
Sign in. Did you get access okay? Sometimes
I did. I got access.
Okay, perfect.
Fine.
Awesome.
My question was, so it was I was a bit under the gun to purchase it. There was a notice that there was a special for a particular period of time that was ending that day on New Year's Eve. And so I sent a message to you and I didn't hear back. Of course, it was New Year's Eve, so I wasn't. And I just took the plunge and purchased it.
So I did respond.
Oh,
yep.
Really?
I did respond.
What happened to your response?
Yeah, let me see if it comes up. But have you got?
But I don't mind just jumping into the question.
Okay, perfect.
Kind of being present with where we are now.
Yeah,
so
totally.
I'm in Canada, and I purchased not totally sure if they related, how directly they related, but of course it's important to me that they do because. Right. There was also a couple of videos, at least the one that I covered that you mentioned, there was a video down below that wasn't there that was going to go into a little bit more detail, I think, on how to fill.
Oh, okay. And let me go look. Was it in regards to one of the contracts specifically? So sometimes
it was the first contract, which
if you want to tell me the contract, sometimes if I'm updating a document, I'll pull the video as well until it's updated.
Sure, totally.
But do you have questions around that document? Because we could just tackle that if you've got questions about a document.
So I haven't looked at it for a couple of weeks, and I just jumped on the call just to see how it relates to Canadian and to join in. So
no worries. So why don't you pause? I'm going to just let you take a moment, take a look at that, and if you've got a question I can help with, then just go ahead and come back and ask the question. Stay on the call. You can take a look. But if Kathleen or Larissa have a question, let's tackle one of those.
I don't have one right now. I just saw your message and thought I would listen in.
Oh, awesome. Kathleen, what's your business? What do you do?
I don't have a business right now, but I was really impressed. I guess I came across you from JVology, and I was really impressed with you. Plus the fact that I live in Seattle too, and
Oh,
I
you
just thought
do.
I would like to I'm just not in a location where I really want to show my face, so I'm not showing
I
it
get it.
today.
That's me about 90% of the time. I know. With kids and messes, I totally understand. Well, Kathleen, happy that you're here. If you've got any questions or if you're thinking about starting a business or whatever, just let
Yeah,
me
that's
know.
kind of what I was thinking about, but I don't have questions at the moment because I saw you right after I got off a religious call. So my mind is, this is morning. Morning is not me. But I just wanted to hear when other people ask questions. That usually makes me think. We got on
Totally.
the last time I was on. We were talking a lot about um we got on this really long talk on copyrights and stuff.
Got it. Well, I'm glad you're here. You're welcome to listen in. I see that David has joined us. And Larissa, I think you said you had a question. So let's go ahead and tackle your question.
Yeah, so I had something weird happen, and I don't know if you can answer this because it's related to insurance, but so I got an email from my insurance broker saying that the accountant of the insurance provider suddenly realized that they undercharged me by $100 or something like that for my package, and that I have to pay them this extra amount by the end of the month, or they're revoking my insurance retroactively, even though it's from 2019. So it's like that time period is over. I paid what they asked me to pay at the time, and now it's 2021. And they're, so I'm just wondering, like, can people do that? Like, it sounds really sketchy to me. And I've contacted like my provincial regulatory body for insurance companies, but it's like, I can't just talk to somebody, like it's email and
Do you guys have, yeah, do you have, I mean, so there's a couple things. One is I would ask them to show you the terms, right? Like, okay, show me the document or the paperwork that that I signed at the time. Like, show me what I signed at the time.
Yeah, I did that, and he couldn't provide it for me.
Yeah, so you tell them to go fly a kite. I mean, the reality is, do you guys have a consumer protection mechanism? Like thinking about contacting your insurance commissioner?
I'm pretty sure we do. Yeah.
So you're going to want to look and see, because you're in Alberta, right?
No, Ontario.
Ontario. I'm sorry. Why did I have that wrong? Ontario. Let me see. Consumer protection. I don't know if you guys have commissioners, if you've got like an attorney general. I'm not sure how you're structured there. Okay. I'm just going to search complaint, consumer protection complaint, filing a consumer complaint. Here we go.
Okay. I was looking at insurance companies specifically, but I didn't realize maybe I could go to a more broad.
Well, so there's a couple things you could think about. One, does the Better Business Bureau operate in Canada as well?
I think so. Yeah, it sounds familiar.
So here's what I do with consumer issues like this, where you're getting a little bit jacked around. They can't, give you the information necessary to say, yes, this is valid. Here's what you signed at the time. It's on them, but you could also just say, if you're going to pursue this, I will. And the key is that this is leverage, meaning that as soon as you execute the leverage, it's no longer leverage. So when people have consumer protection issues here in the States, usually I try to have them, just talk with the person and see if they can address things. So for example, I had something go terribly wrong with AT&T, which is a company that I hate. I'll go on the record saying that. I think they're one of the crappiest companies out there. They would not let me essentially cancel my phone plan, and they wouldn't release my device even when I'd paid. And so they hung me up for a long time, refusing to facilitate the transition of my number to another carrier. And after getting literally jacked around for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and hello, I run a business. Like, this was a big problem and I couldn't get them to respond. I was like, fine, you're going to be responding to a Better Business Bureau complaint. I'm going to report you to the Consumer Protection Division of my state and the state where you're headquartered. And in your case, like in Washington, especially around insurance, in our state levels, we also have state insurance commissioners. I don't know if you guys have an equivalent in Canada, but I would check because maybe you've got an insurance division, insurance
Yeah, that's the
commissioner.
one I contacted, and yeah, they haven't been very accessible. So
Yeah, well, but this is the thing about leverage. It doesn't necessarily always matter how accessible or responsive a department is. Sometimes just threatening that is enough to make the problem go away, right? So if they contact you again, or if you've got a contact person there, you could just say, look, you haven't showed me the paperwork that I signed that says that at the time that I signed up, I knew that that was the amount and I somehow didn't pay it. This is your mistake. Coverage is going to continue. And if it doesn't, if you don't resolve this on your end, then I'm going to file a complaint with the insurance commissioner, with the Better Business Bureau, and with our provincial. I assume you guys have a consumer protection division like we do, because you've got probably more proactive consumer protection laws, if I were to guess.
okay.
But use that as leverage. You can execute that leverage. So for example, if that doesn't get a response or get them to comply, you can certainly move forward on it. But just understand anytime you're in a negotiating kind of position, anytime you execute your leverage, it's actually no longer leverage. So there's this sweet spot in negotiations where, and I'm not somebody that makes threats just to make threats. I'm saying, like, say if you're going to do something, you don't say like, I'm going to do this if you're not going to do it, but you can say, if you don't respond appropriately, here's what I'll do. And there was an insurance, I've helped people through insurance scenarios here in Washington State. That key negotiation time is usually when it gets done, but there have been times where I've had to go file a complaint with our state insurance commissioner, and that got an immediate response. This was in a healthcare scenario from the health insurance company. So there's different ways that you could approach it, but I'd have the discussion first. And then the other thing is, if you I know probably these days, this was a while ago when I was, writing letters, and I just literally drafted up a formal letter that had the whole history of what had happened with that insurance company. And I addressed it to the Consumer Protection Division of our state and our insurance commissioner. And I did a carbon copy, like CC the health insurance company. And so, they all received it within a week or whatever of me sending it. I got an immediate response from the health insurance company, and they ended up covering all the claims. So there are ways that you can leverage that, but you have to, I would kind of step by step, say it first, see if they respond, then you can do it, see if they respond.
Okay, thank you. Some wise advice. It also made me wonder, like, in your experience with insurance, I find what happens is, I tell them this is what I'm doing in my business, or they have an idea now because I've renewed with them for multiple years and nothing has changed. And yet the rates keep changing from one year to the next. And I keep asking them, can you please, how did you arrive at that number? Because it kind of sounds arbitrary, and I find that a bit suspicious. Like, is that, and my broker was like, well, that's how they do it. They just assess the risk and then they decide what they're willing to charge. And then I'm like, well, maybe I should be looking at other companies. And
you absolutely should. Every year or a couple of years, you should be changing insurance companies, or at least getting a survey from the marketplace, getting new quotes, because that's exactly how it works. It's just, it's how these businesses work. They're like, oh, this person's staying with us, we're gonna bump their rates up this year by X percentage, right? It's like Comcast here in the States. Any of our telecommunications companies are terrible at that. Comcast, cable, you have to be on it, and you constantly have to be your own watchdog, unfortunately.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's really valuable guidance.
Well, and the other thing is, if you are connected with a broker, here's the other thing about being stuck with a particular insurance provider is a lot of people will be like, oh, my agent's at State Farm. No, work with a broker. It sounds like you're at least working with a broker who can help you keep eyeballs on the marketplace, because maybe each year when your policy is about to renew, you go to your broker a month or two ahead of time and give him or her some time to get some new quotes in place for you and shop around, right? So I would just put put the dates on your calendar, and then be proactive about it so that you're not caught having to renew a policy that you're unhappy with the pricing on.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much.
Yes, good luck. I know, a lot to think about. David, welcome. How are you? How can I help? Oh,
Hey,
that's
Heather.
David. Good. There's so many Davids in the world. I'm glad to see it's you.
Ah, good to see you.
How
So,
are you?
I'm very good. I'm very good.
Good.
Doing well.
Yes,
Um, your family is growing. I read and exciting and
they
all kinds
are.
of fun stuff.
So busy, I know.
That's
Very
good.
good. Yes, we're healthy and we've got lots to be grateful for. It's still chaos. I still would vote for less chaos all around, but we're good.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
Yeah. Thank you for the reality check.
Yeah,
Um,
just expect more, and
totally.
it happens. It drops off when they're out of college.
Right. Yes, I know, which I'm not ready for. So we'll just take it.
Yeah,
Well, how can I help you? It's good to see you. Do you have something I can support you with?
yeah. This is a power of attorney kind of question that
Mm.
leads into LLC members.
Mm-hmm.
So I was my brother went through and did all his estate planning documents, and he appointed me as his executor and medical advisor and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But going through the living will,
Mm-hmm.
the attorney that he was doing all these documents with had a section I'd never seen before called digital assets.
Yep.
And um, it took me off guard because I thought I was pretty up to speed on all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I said, okay, I read through all this, so tell me what this digital asset piece is.
Yeah.
And essentially, it comes down, if you do anything digitally on behalf of your brother,
Mm-hmm.
and this isn't in there, you're committing a felony. And I went, wait a second, how's that work? And he said, think of it this way. Somebody unauthorized accesses your bank account and advisory account and all of that kind of stuff and moves funds around without your permission. What do you call that? And I went, well, illegal. And he goes, and he said, yeah, essentially it's illegal. So this paragraph
Mm-hmm.
helps define that you can do that
Mm-hmm.
when he's incapacitated.
Yeah.
So in Pennsylvania, they didn't have that until January this year.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a half a dozen other states that don't have that.
Yeah.
So the first question is that correct? That bank accounts, and he said even emails, because you're accessing emails, unauthorized emails or unauthorized access, in unauthorized Facebook accounts and all of those kinds of things. So that's the first part of the question.
Yeah, I'd say he's probably taking a hard line. And let me be clear that I don't practice family law. I don't do estate planning.
Sure.
My sense is that, first of all, I definitely know the landscape is changing. I know what you're talking about. There's a lot of digital asset addendums and documents that are being created in conjunction with estate planning just because of the way life has evolved, right? And to partly as a way to get people organized around like what are their online and digital assets and account information that they should be taking care of or have somebody take care of upon their death or they become incompetent or something. So it's definitely relevant. Now, the question becomes, would a court of law or would somebody, a regulatory body that maybe is overseeing probate or something, would they find you in violation of a federal law if you are basically doing what you're required to do and you don't have a digital asset addendum and you're dealing with somebody's digital accounts? I don't know. That's a stretch for me. Now, is it possible that if you're not named anywhere in the documents and you're a person that just happens to have access to this individual's account and you get in and muck it around, that there's a chance for that? Certainly.
Yeah,
right? I think, because there's an issue of like, what does the law say? And then also, how is it interpreted?
Sure.
Right. And how is it interpreted can leave a lot of open ends and loose ends because these laws can be interpreted differently. Now, it certainly can't hurt to specify that you have access to all the digital assets and to, have people specifically take care of that. But I don't know the status of this particular law across all of the states, and this is typically going to be dealt with on a state by state basis.
Right.
So yeah, it's maybe not a clear answer, but certainly people should be thinking about it. I recommend to people, whether they're doing estate planning or not, if you run a business, you need to have your digital assets, and even for your personal life, even if you don't have a business, you should have either a spreadsheet or a LastPass or something that's got all of your information somewhere safe that somebody else could access upon something happening to you.
Not online.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, well, and it's arguable. I mean, the trade-off of having that kind of stuff organized in a KeyPass or LastPass is, they use encryption and all this stuff, and there's certainly a risk, but it's also this trade-off of usability, right?
Yeah.
What is somebody likely to do versus is somebody going to create a written document and keep that stuff updated all the time? Probably
Right.
not, right? So, yeah.
And passwords are key because they change every 6 months. So,
Right. Yeah.
So that gets into the second question about a member in your LLC.
Mm-hmm.
Having that similar kind of access to bank accounts and those kinds of things. So I have a company and my wife is a member.
Yep.
And so if I get hit by a bus or something like that, then she can shut the company down, sell it off, or shut it down. Is there any other way she could do that without being a member?
Well, yes, let's talk about that. So one, you're going to, and I assume, what is your company? Is it an LLC? Is it
An LLC, yeah.
It's an LLC. So yeah, as a member, I mean, this kind of thing is actually going to be covered in your operating agreement. So you're going to want to pull out your operating agreement, revisit.
Yeah,
First of all, what are your roles within the company? So this can sometimes be spelled out like, are you a member managed LLC where you've got all members have equal decision-making power? Some LLCs will designate somebody as, so for example, there's an issue of membership versus control, right? And so some people might have equity in an LLC, but they're actually not a decision maker.
Right.
Right? And this kind of thing typically gets spelled out in an LLC operating agreement. So you go look for that language to, first of all, make sure that your operating agreement matches the scenario that you're in or that you want it to be. Because a lot of times people end up with templated operating agreements or operating agreements that don't actually match the way that they want to be managing their company. So are you guys 50-50? Does she have equal decision making, or is she a financial partner, but she's not helping to actually manage the business? So first, go look at that language, get it updated if you need it updated. If it doesn't reflect reality and you want it to say something different, then you should have a current operating agreement that reflects that. And then you also want to make sure that in the dissolution and winding up, you've spelled out what that looks like. Typically, yes, a remaining member, if you're looking at standard LLC operating agreement provisions, a remaining member of an LLC would be able to wind up business on the death of a co-member, or in some cases continue on with business, right? Being in that you guys are in the same family, she probably won't have to compete with, because the trick that happens in some LLC scenarios, if it's not planned for through people's estate planning documents and the operating agreement and other transition documents that the company has, is that you end up having to buy out the estate, right? So let's say you have two members that are both within an LLC, one of them passes away, they're different families, you'd have to buy out the estate of the other, typically, or if it's not covered, like it can get really, really messy. Sometimes you end up having a spouse of the deceased member that steps in and is now trying to co-run a company that they never had anything to do with. So this is why this type of planning is really, really important. So one, you're going to want to make sure that whatever the management scenario is, which is usually towards the top of an operating agreement, that it's spelled out correctly. And then you're going to want to hop down. It's usually, farther down, section 7, 8, 9, depending on how big your agreement is, and look at the dissolution of and winding up of company business. And specifically what happens when, somebody passes away or is incapacitated. What are the other members allowed to do? Do they continue running the business? Do they wind up the business? And so that kind of stuff needs to get addressed in the operating agreement so that you're not violating that agreement by doing something other than what it allows for.
Good. Okay. I'll go take a look at those again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like I said, if they don't match what you want them to be, then, just go get it updated.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Well, you're asking all the right questions. Good work.
Thanks. Thanks for
yeah,
your time.
totally. Good to see you. And I was going to say, I have a friend. It's interesting that you bring up this thing of digital assets. One of my friends, do you know who Nancy Jutton is?
No.
She is a speaker trainer, and she's out here in the Issaquah area. Let me see if I can pull up her website. You actually would really like her based on the work that you guys do. She has something called, let me see. I'm just going to Google her and see if I can find her site. Get known, get paid. But she has something that is like a financial roadmap. But it's about this issue of what you're talking about. It's about helping people get their financial affairs in order, mostly from the standpoint of organized, making sure they've documented all of this stuff, making sure that spouses who are working together have access to each other's information, all of that. Life Goes On, Financial Roadmap is what it's called. She used to have, oh, this is a weird format. This came up in an audiobook on Amazon, but she actually used to have, maybe I'll message her and see it. If you're interested, I could email you. She used to have her own website dedicated to the Life Goes On Financial Roadmap. But I'll message that for you if I can find it. But it's a really interesting resource, and she actually walks people through kind of a gamified version of like how you get this done in a way that feels like, not like doomsday. People put this kind of stuff off because it feels doomsday to them. And so I like her approach to it. And it came out of real life experience. I think she had a friend that died or something, pretty traumatic happened. And she realized like, oh my gosh, people need this support. And she and her husband's a financial planner. They put together this whole game and system to actually help people do this. But
Yeah,
here,
sounds good. I got her website up now.
oh, good. Yes. Her main website is getknowngetpaid.com. But if you search the Life Goes On Financial Roadmap, that's her work. And I think it's a pretty cool resource for people that are looking for that type of support. I'm happy to make an email introduction and connect you if you are interested. I won't do it unless you email me and say, yes, I'd like to know Nancy. But I think you'd enjoy knowing a bit about her work.
Sure. Sounds good.
Okay. Awesome. So, Arrow, were you able to find the document that you had question about?
Yeah, I had to look around at a few things. I still didn't find your reply. I saw the two emails in the same screen, but maybe I can just get these answers here. So I have quite a few questions, so I'll probably have to pop in for a few Mondays.
It's what it's designed for, so I'm happy to have you.
Great. So we'll just kind of go one step at a time, and then starting with the independent contractor agreement. So how relevant is this to Canadian?
It'd be very relevant. The caveat is that obviously I don't practice law in Canada. I'm not a Canadian lawyer, but the reality is I work with people around the world who do cross-border business, right? I work with people who have independent contractors based in the States, but in another state. I work with people who have independent contractors based in another country, right?
Yeah.
The key issues when it comes to independent contractors, I mean, the primarily biggest issues that I see are one, somebody having access to the insides of your business and tons of your proprietary information,
Right.
right? So the independent contractor agreements are there to say, look, the proprietary information stays with the business. You don't get to use it. You don't get to take it out into the world. You have access to it to the extent you need to do your work.
I'll save you some breath because I know it's valuable.
Yeah. No worries.
And I'm aware of what it's for.
Yes.
It's for filling it out that it's
You want a bottle? Little chocolate face cake. I'll be up in a minute, okay?
it's more filling it out that it's relevant to me or applicable to me.
Yeah, a
So-
contract is a contract is a contract. So what the parts that would need to be updated, and you could either take these to a Canadian attorney. I could probably send you some sample clauses, but the jurisdiction and venue, right? Because
Right.
you're based in the Calgary area, is that correct?
No, I'm on Vancouver Island.
Oh, you are? So you traveled to that event for Jay.
Yes.
Oh, nice. Okay. So, and I've got some good referrals in the Vancouver area, some business attorneys up there.
Maybe Victoria. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's great.
Yeah. So you would just,
And they wouldn't mind. Like, I was wondering if they would mind me bringing them a template.
most attorneys don't say,
Okay.
yeah, most attorneys don't. I mean, I get brought contracts all the time from clients that say, does this work for my business? Right. Now,
Okay.
depending on the attorney, here's the thing. Is my approach is that I really try, if there's a contract that somebody has been using, if they're familiar with it, like I don't try to rewrite the whole thing. I'll definitely look for holes. I'm going to look for problems with it, especially in light of their business and what they're doing. But I will say that there are times where I'm like, you know what? They just need a whole new contract, right? And then there are other times where it's like, okay, this works. We just need to fix a few things. I don't know what the approach of any attorney that you might work with, right? They could have a very strong preference that they like the independent contractor agreements they've drafted. You know what I mean? So I can't promise you what their approach will be, but generally you want to work with somebody who is familiar with small businesses. They know that you don't have an unlimited budget. You know, if you ask them, look, can you insert a venue and jurisdiction provision that's appropriate for Canada? They
Right.
should be able to do that in a snap, right?
Okay, great. So that's helpful because I was trying to just fill it in myself, but I should take it to someone who knows. And
You could definitely get them to improve those provisions that are going to be relevant for Canada. And those are the primary things that come to mind. There may be, and this is also partly going to depend where you're hiring your independent contractors, how they draft any of the provisions that apply to your independent contract, like the work that your independent contractor does, right? I don't know Canadian employment laws. I presume that Canada, like the US, if I'm working with a VA in the Philippines, US government's not going to try to be like, oh, this is an employee and you need to pay all their taxes. They understand that that looks like an independent contractor scenario, right? I don't know Canadian law when it comes to employment scenarios like that, but I have worked with a lot of Canadians who hire people in the US as a VA, you know, or hire
yeah,
people.
well, I have a number of contracts right now with different vendors that are ranging from like $2,000 to $19,000. So some of them
Oh,
are
yeah.
significant, and then
Yes.
some of them are smaller, and they are dealing with proprietary information. I'm already seeing like a lot of the frameworks I've been using in web conferences and web summits being actually pirated by like even by some that
So you're seeing some of the information that you're presenting at conferences being
like quite a bit, but I mean, information just passes. We're all kind of, human evolution. We all grow together. We find a phrase we like. We just sort of, it gels. Like that's okay. But it's
Well, maybe,
awakening certain. Well,
maybe. Let's be.
one is actually, what is her name? She's like I want to say not Marissa.
Marissa
Marie
Murgatroyd? No,
Forleo,
Marie
Forleo, actually. Like got the 7 Freedoms framework that I've been presenting. And then I heard her come out, and I don't follow her. I just came across her at Eben Pagan's big summit. And she presented 7 liberations, which was following to the T my framework, right?
Oh,
Some of
interesting.
this is just going to get out there, and
Yes.
I've
Yes.
got ideas that I've come across too that I adopt in.
Yeah.
But
Well, and
as I'm working with specific contractors, it's important because I've noticed some of them taking like
yes,
the headline for my
it's
my
very,
program and
Yep.
using it in a blog, but applying to their, so.
and let's talk for a moment just about that, because this is a really important question, and it comes up a lot, right? To what extent can you protect your information? What's worth protecting? Trade, obviously we've got trademark and copyright law. Trademark protects, and I tell people, if you think of your business or your body of work or your brand as a mountain, trademark protects the top of the mountain. It protects the snowy peaks. Your business name, your tagline, your logo, it's a short phrase, right? Short group of words, short phrase, or a single word sometimes, like Starbucks, like Nike.
Yeah.
Right, or a design mark. So you can also protect, if you've got a really unique design mark, that can be protected by a trademark. So that's really about brand recognition, but that can apply to a program name, a course name. Plenty of people will get a trademark around a brand asset specifically, separate and apart from their company name or their overall brand, right? So that's another way. But the ability to protect that stuff largely is related to how unique it is. So you can't protect everything.
Right.
There's a lot of words that people use that just come from the ordinary course of business and that we, pull out of the dictionary. Like, we don't say Starbucks or Nike unless we're referring to Starbucks or Nike. Those are not words that are just used in our regular, lexicon. Right?
To be unique and
yes. So the protectability, if that's even a word, the protectability of something, a phrase, a mark, or whatever, has to do with how unique it is. If it is generic, if it's merely descriptive, it's much harder to protect. If it's generic, you can't get a registration around it. If it's descriptive, maybe, but I really encourage people not to use descriptive marks whenever possible, because very often they end up on the supplemental register, not the principal register. You don't want to be on the supplemental register for the most part. The reason people seek trademarks is because they want exclusive use over that phrase or name. By very nature of ending up on the supplemental register, you don't get exclusive use. So there are some things that, like people will be like, oh, I want to get a trademark around, my 5-step success system. No, that's not protectable,
and pardon me, I have quite a few frameworks, and I've really been working them and tightening them. And as far as the trademarking process, are you seeking separate, like there's certification marks? So I have a school, it's like an academy, they're online programs. So I understand I can go about it as certification marks too, and then I can just have like a school body, and then the programs in a different, like the educational body, and then the programs in a different domain that the one owns the other, as far as using certification marks. But if so the trademarking process, is this an individual application for each name.
Yep.
And then that's about a $300 to $600 investment usually per name. Is that correct?
Depends. So it depends on how you do them. Depends whether you have support. So in Canada, and let's be clear that with trademarks, so let's start with copyrights, right? Copyrights, there's something called the Berne Convention. And if you have a copyright registration in your country, and your country is a part of the Berne Convention, there's something like 164 or 167 countries that have signed on to this, then your copyrights are going to be recognized and upheld in those other countries. So it's easier actually to have copyright protection because it kind of is shared around. You don't have to run off to 100 other countries where you might be doing your work. And I'm exaggerating. Most people, are crossing maybe into a few countries with their work, but and get separate registrations. But that's not the case with trademarks. You do have to seek separate trademark registrations in the country where you are going to be doing business with that brand or that mark. So if you're in Canada and you have, let's say you have, 80% of your audience in Canada, you'd want to mark there. You'd want a registration there around that brand or business name or signature product program or product name. Similarly, if you have a big percentage of your audience in the US, you are probably at some point wanting to seek protection here separately as well, so that in the online marketplace, if you are doing events online and you have a big, US audience or whatever, you've got that protection. Sorry, I'm going to close this door because I think my hubby's home and I hear lots of wrestling noises. I just don't want him to come.
Now with these agreements,
and just really quick, let me wrap up on that point because I want to talk about cost. Remember, trademarks are the top visibility portion of your business, right? So they are more expensive to protect. Copyright registrations are far more reasonable, meaning that you can get a copyright registration around an entire workbook or a regular book or an audio series or a video tutorial or whatever for much less than a trademark registration. Think of the rest of the mountain, because we didn't finish the mountain analogy. The rest of the mountain is the body of your work, right? So you've got the visible snow-capped peaks up top. Those are protected by trademarks. The rest of the mountain is the body of your work. This is all the ways that you produce content, create things that are protected by copyright in the world through your services, through creating content, through doing tutorials, through writing articles, right? All of that stuff is protectable by copyright.
Designing illustrations, like
exactly. Creating, there's so many visual illustrations and people do all kinds of branded assets to support their instruction and support their concepts. You want to seek. And the question I get is like, oh, do I have to get copyright registrations around everything? I produce so much content. No, but look very clearly at what constitutes the key portions of your work. These are going to be the core components of any frameworks or systems you develop, any teaching points that are uniquely yours, right? And you're going to want to decide, what does my core work look like, and put a plan in place to protect that, right? So that
and how would I go about go about copyright registration?
So in Canada, I know people that have done it directly themselves. I'm not sure what the fee is in Canada. Here, I mean, I think for like $50 or $60, you can get a copyright registration on something. And
okay.
Yeah, it's
so each time I create, like, especially when they're foundational framework ebooks, and with and graphics.
Yes.
I guess if I do the ebook and it's got the graphics in
got everything in it,
because I have illustrators creating a lot of unique kind of frameworks around that.
Absolutely.
Then as I copyright the ebook, that would include the graphics, I guess.
Yeah, and you may still have a reason for specific graphics. If you pull them out and use them separately, I might encourage you to also treat them separately depending on how they're being used. but certainly you want to consider the core aspects of your work and invest. I mean, I tell people plan to spend, if you're really serious about your work, plan to spend between initial trademarks and copyrights $4,000 to $5,000 protecting your IP. And for most people, they're not going to know this out of the gate. They've been in business a few years. They have some of these core systems developed. They have some of their branding underway or secured. They're not going to be doing a lot of significant changes in the marketplace anytime soon, right?
Yeah, and that's where I'm at now.
Totally.
And I'm noticing with a lot of the frameworks that it's like it's been ahead of the curve for a long time. Now the curve is just meeting it, and people are grabbing it. Like people who are hosting me on their webinar conferences.
And let's talk about this, because the other way that you protect your intellectual property, right? So you've got trademark registrations, you've got copyright registrations. The other way you protect your intellectual property is through contracts. Here's what you can and can't do with my content, either as a consumer, as a JV partner, as a third-party platform. If you're inviting me on as a speaker, you have to have clear contracts around that stuff. And that's why, I mean, you've been on my site. I've got 4 bundles that are full of contracts designed to be really clear about who owns what. And, I care a lot that people that have spent years developing their body of work, and, and I've worked with consultants that go into Microsoft and go into Starbucks, and these big companies just want to put a master services agreement in place and eat it all up. Like, okay, well, we get to reproduce your work and we distribute, no. And so I want people to be really clear, and because it ends up surprising people, right? You go on to a third-party stage and you do a presentation, and then suddenly they've got a recording of it and they're selling it separately as a, like if that hasn't been talked about and you're not clear that that's going to happen, that stuff needs to be dealt with in advance of the event.
Well, it's amazing how quickly that fire has lit. Yes. So I know I'm on to. So I purchased your business evolution package, and so I see these agreements, and so I just take them to a regional lawyer, and
you can certainly do that. Yes, and then the biggest thing that you're going to want to be watching for is. And it partly depends on the agreement. I'm just going to open up the list of what's in my business evolution package. You are venue and jurisdiction, right? So that's the first thing that comes to mind. Because you're based in Canada, you want to, if there is a dispute, you want to be resolving all of those issues in Canada and under Canadian law. Let me just go to that bundle.
And so I don't go just entering my town and province. I need to find out where that is, whether it's in Victoria, etc.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and and those clauses just might be drafted. I mean, I could send you some sample jurisdiction clauses that are created for Canadian businesses, but a local attorney there might have a strong preference about how those are drafted. And so it partly depends on whether you really want the hand-holding of working one-on-one with an attorney, which if you have the budget to do, I always recommend, right? Because you're going to have...
I have, I'm in a very expensive launch right now. So I'm just, so at this point, I'm just incorporating, I'm just going through the different... I mean, I'll invest where it's necessary, but I don't mind phasing in my investments too.
Totally. No, I get that.
I can, I can pick my battle. I'm not adverse to investing in it, just picking my battle.
Well, and in all these agreements, because I'm looking at them here, independent contractor, joint venture agreement, joint venture planning guide, affiliate agreement, all the way down to, the dispute resolution guide is a guide, but you've got brand ambassadors, social influencer agreements, featured expert, contributing writers. All of these are going to have a jurisdiction and venue clause. So you want to make sure that Canadian law applies and that you've chosen the location where any disputes are going to be heard if there is a dispute. Now, for international dispute resolution clauses, I want to be really clear that...
And a good portion of my contractors and vendors are international.
Which I assumed about you, yes. And so you want to be really clear that it can be challenging to get disputes heard. Like and this is why you just need good provisions in advance, is for you, what I'd want, and I'm happy to send over sample clauses I've drafted for other clients with the caveat that I'm not a Canadian attorney. This might look
Right.
different if you go
Yeah.
to but in the States, what I always recommend for international disputes is what I call a multi-step dispute resolution clause, where you have first, the parties agree to negotiate in good faith to try to resolve anything themselves. If that fails, then it's mediation, which can be conducted telephonically, online, internationally. I don't want anybody to have to travel for a mediation because it defeats the purpose of keeping costs down for small businesses, right? And
Right.
people that you work with. So I always include the caveat that for both mediation and arbitration, this can be done telephonically, online, right? Through video, like however. And these days, hello, we should be able to do that. So
Yeah.
so that's the way that I draft mine, because I still see left and right old school provisions that would require somebody from the US to travel to Canada or vice versa to have that dispute heard. And that's not what I want. That's not how we need to be doing business.
Right.
So-
So that's something for me to watch as I'm entering into agreements, not just issuing agreements. But
Totally. I just as an example, I worked with a woman a couple weeks ago, right before the holidays, and she is very, 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 very well known in her field. She's got people around the world that are trying to work with her. She teaches some techniques around newborn babies, and so hospitals are trying to get her in to teach their staff, and she's doing all of this stuff online. And this guy out of Israel who runs, something in the healthcare system, I don't know if it's a series of hospitals or what, put an agreement in place with her. No jurisdiction clause, no venue clause, no anything. It's who knows where that dispute could be heard or what could happen with it, right? So I'm in the process of trying to negotiate her out of that agreement that she signed, but it's a really poorly drafted agreement. And the number of times I see that, and for small businesses, again, it's not what I want for you. I want it to be easy. I want it to be so clear that if something goes wrong, here's what we're going to do, and we can do it from our respective locations. We just have to get the right mediator on the phone or the right arbitrator. So that's my recommendation on how those clauses should be structured. Like I said, I'm happy to send you some sample language. And then you would just go through each of those agreements and look for that jurisdiction and venue clause and make sure that it says what it needs to say instead of having the standard language, which is going to be US based.
okay, great. I actually could probably call the Canada Revenue or whatever and ask them where the jurisdictions are.
And you probably could search online and find out. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
That's helpful. I do. I do have another question, but I think I'll pass the baton if someone else has one.
Totally. Yep. Great questions. Forrest. Yes, David.
On copyright, I saw where you had to file for a new copyright if more than some percentage of the content has changed. Is that correct?
No. So this is one of the common myths, like, oh, well, I can own this content or call it mine or use it if I just change 10% of the existing language, right? There's this weird I don't know who started that. It's a very, very false myth in the, content creation and publishing world, but copyright infringement is a case-by-case analysis, right? You have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. There's no like bright line rule about what is and what isn't copyright infringement. But my rule for my clients and people that I coach is if you didn't create the content yourself, you don't have a license to use it, you didn't pay for somebody else to create it on your behalf, you don't use it. You don't take somebody else's framework. You don't take their languaging. You don't borrow concepts from their body of work. This is the point about all of us needing to be creators for ourselves. And I was talking with this guy who's international. He's in the psychology world and he's kind of cutting edge, but a lot of his work is around taking concepts that have been around for a while and, really applying a new viewpoint to them. But there's a very fine line, especially if you are directly referencing somebody else's work. Like, no, don't do it. Don't take their work. So For example, I had this woman who's in financial services say, well, I really like the teachings of this person in the financial world who's written this book. Can I use this book to run my workshop? No, it's their
Right.
work. Right? So
Right.
so for me, it's yeah, I'm very, very clear that we all need to be creating content from the ground up. Obviously, we can't eliminate what we've already learned, but we need to be genuinely creating our own work, our own concepts, our own description. And let's be clear that like none of us, like I teach on copyright and trademark and other issues. I didn't develop this, right? But my way of teaching it is going to be different than a lot of the ways that other attorneys talk about it and teach it. So intellectual property, especially copyrights, protect your expression of the idea, not the idea itself. So like with Arrow's example of Marie Forleo coming up with 7 liberations, and an attorney would have to sit down and look at the languaging used and compare yours and compare hers and try to determine, does this look like that originated in the same place? I've also seen ideas spring up at the same time in the world from different people that don't know each other and aren't familiar with each other's work, and they can look almost identical. So phrases, it's the same way that baby names, there will be a historic name that all of a sudden becomes wild one year without people even talking about. Like, it's just the way anyways, I could get into the woo-woo aspect of how we're all connected, but yeah, and Arrow, you're muted.
So this was, sorry.
No, that's all right. That's all right.
This was the originator. If I own the copyright, do I need to get a new copyright if I've added or changed?
Oh, you've updated your own work.
Percentage of my own work, yes.
Yeah. I'd recommend it. So, and let's talk about why. One, because you probably want the most current version protected, especially if you're really confident that you're going to stay with that update. But let's also be clear that copyright you have from the time that you create a work, and copyright rests with the individual, right? As soon as you create something that takes tangible form, you have copyright in that thing. Now, the registration aspect gives you additional protections. It will allow you some financial recovery if you have to go pursue infringement of that copyright. So there's a real benefit to getting the registration, and it puts you down on record as the presumed owner of that work. But you've got 90 days from the time that you create something, which is why in every book publishing contract that will pass muster, there's a clause in there that says usually the publishing house is going to seek copyright protection for that manuscript or that book within 90 days of it being published, right? It's because that's the copyright window on a new work. So the other question I get is somebody saying, well, I created this in 2018. I didn't get a copyright registration on it. And then I say, okay, great. Do a version 2. Update it, get a copyright registration on that, right? So it is advantageous to keep your work current and to also get updated copyright registrations if the change is significant to you. If you want protection around that new idea or the way that idea has evolved.
I can follow up on that. Your previous point on that, because I adapted a 12-question thing that I'd seen someone produce about if you go into the hospital as a patient, here are 12 questions you can ask to help you stay on top of what's going on in your care and be discharged.
Yeah.
I modified that, added some additional things to it, so it kind of like as a workbook document for someone, and I did attribute it to this person. Is that okay, or that's not okay? I'm glad I have not distributed yet, so I'm glad that you're talking about it.
Yes, no, I'm glad you. Yeah, I'm glad you asked. So there's a couple ways that you can approach that, right? And one, you can reach out and ask the person, right? But that can go one of two ways. They can say yes or no, and then now you're on their radar. So they might have eyeballs on your work of like, is this person competitive to me? Now, some people don't care about this stuff. If they care that people are getting the right care, they might be like, fine, share those questions, right? It's out there to serve. So people really have different approaches when it comes to this. But the trick is if you...
By the way, it's going to be a giveaway. It's not something I was going to sell.
Right.
but I was using it as a lead magnet.
Yeah, and see that still has enough of a commercial purpose that anytime you commercialize something, you're really in the risk category of it not being protected under one of the copyright fair use exemptions, because there are some ways that you can reference or use somebody else's work, but they're very limited and it generally does not involve a commercial purpose, right? So what I would do is look at that, look at those concepts, look at those questions, call it something different, like come up with your own title, your own way that you present those, but it really does need to be different. Don't borrow their language, don't just slightly modify it. My recommendation for people that are content creators is, one, you have to track very carefully your sources, right? To avoid plagiarism and avoid doing things that look like you duplicated somebody else's work, because sometimes I think it happens by accident. Sometimes people are very intentional about it, but sometimes it happens by accident. And when you're going to create content, don't be working from notes. Don't be working from looking at somebody else's work. Like literally sit down with a blank sheet of paper and get into creator mode and create from the standpoint of your own internal wisdom, right? People that take and I'm notorious. I'm a massive, like whatever that disease is, there's a I can't remember a term for somebody who takes too much notes. That's me. It's partly the way my brain processes things. But when you go to create something, don't work from your notes, especially if that came from somebody else and somebody else's, source of work. So that's my advice.
So even if I did kind of redo, or I don't know if rephrase is enough of a change, but if I did do some work on each of those questions to make them mine, so to speak, do I still attribute to this person?
No.
So I shouldn't mention at all.
No.
I just need to, okay.
Yeah, because one, it'll flag to them and anybody else looking like, oh, that was the source of the work, which is not what you want. And so give me an example, if you don't mind. Give me an example of like two of the questions. Do you have them, or do they come to mind?
I'd have to open another screen on my computer.
No worries.
So actually I could start, if someone else wanted to do a question, they can do that while I look it up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Heather, I've got a dash. Thanks.
Okay, no worries, David. Good to see you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Have fun with those kids.
Thank you. We will. I want to say welcome to Jen. It looks like we've got somebody who just joined. Jen, happy to have you here. We were talking a lot today about copyright, trademarks, international contract clauses for business protection. If you've got a question, you're welcome to jump into the chat, or you can unmute and we'll take it. Arrow, did you have another question?
You bet. I've got a few more questions,
Okay.
but as I say, I can also spread them out over a few weeks.
Okay.
So one is you had another, like as far as my website protection. So I have the privacy policy and the terms of agreement on each landing page, etc., like on all the pages of my website.
And what is your website, Arrow? I'll just pull it up.
heartdrumbeat.com.
Okay, that's right.
And then when they purchase, I have the liability waiver. So there's a physical component to what I'm instructing, as well as emotional and psychological. So, I think there was something else you mentioned, kind of being required. Like there seems to be a gap. I think there's one more article you mentioned, and I wasn't familiar with what it was or how it distinguishes itself from.
Yeah. So a couple things. Can I give you some feedback, and then we'll talk about that final set of terms?
This is an old website, like it's overdue for redo right now. It's not showing my branding or anything like that.
No, that's okay. I get it. Your terms of use and DMCA notice. So first of all, do you host content created by other people?
No. I did have, it's dormant right now, but I had a
Mhm.
healthy living experts forum where I interview other
Okay.
experts, like on just like sort of cross promotional.
Got
But
it.
I'm not doing that right
Okay.
now. But I
Because a couple things is, yeah, and I haven't read all of the, all of the terms here. One, it looks like one run, like long run on sentence. Like if you actually go look at the format of your terms, they're not separated. You don't see one, two, you know what I mean? I'd fix
Okay.
that. Terms are supposed to be very usable, easy to read, have like you want it to have a very clear roadmap to it so that if somebody clicks through to this page, they're not like, oh my gosh, I don't even know where to start for the issue that I was wondering about. Right?
Oh, yeah.
So
Those were just straight from the lawyer.
I get it, but you'd be penalized for this. Yeah, somebody would come to your site if it was a legal review and go, oh, this is not user friendly, and that would be a mark against you.
Okay.
So you want to update that page so that it's very clear. There's space between paragraphs. People can navigate it in a way that actually allows them to access and use the terms of use. And then under the DMCA, if you're hosting third-party content, it's important that you do have a DMCA notice on your site, but you don't want to have a DMC notice if you have not registered a representative of your company with the United States Copyright Office, which is my next question. Do you have your business registered or an agent, probably you, with the DMC office? I mean, with the Copyright Office for this provision? Most people don't. They just slap terms up and they don't have.
Well, this was, the terms were purchased through a service.
I get it.
So I'm not sure whether they're registered anywhere. I mean, I registered with.
No, you would actually have to go get online, register yourself, submit information through several forms that you are the DMCA representative for your business.
I think I did that, but it's not a government form. It's a form with the legal group that created the documents. No?
Yeah, that's not what I'm talking about.
This was all like 4 years ago, so I don't really recall.
Yeah, so let me just tell you my beef with the legal industry, including with some folks who provide online forms, is that there's no education that comes along with the forms. There's no education that comes along with what are best practices, how do you use them, where do you post them, how do you achieve constructive notice, which is a legal requirement that people actually consent to your terms. This I'm just giving you a quick website review because I can also use this to train others. And so DMCA, so under the Digital Millennium Copyright, what is the last part? Sorry, my brain is tired. I'm having Monday morning brain. Copyright Act, right? So you actually have to register a representative of your company with and I can find the form and drop it in for you. You have to register an agent of your company with the U.S. Copyright Office to actually take advantage of the safe harbor provision. The whole point of the DMCA as an act is that if you post content, which is likely third-party content, not your own, and it violates somebody's intellectual property rights, that individual can contact you and say, hey, take down this content, it's mine, it's infringing on my rights. And they have to meet certain requirements and provide the right information to you. And I'd need to look about whether your DMCA notice spells all of that out. But if they do that and you take the content down in response to that infringement notice, you're no longer liable. As a third party, you're no longer liable for copyright infringement because you complied with that. But that's a safe harbor provision. And it allows third party hosts of other people's content online to not be responsible for what that person posts. If you respond appropriately, you request the right information, right, and you take that action of removing the content. Now, my sense is that unless you're hosting third-party content, you actually don't need this. If you are, you do, but you have to set it up in such a way that you actually have protection under the DMCA. And I think right now what I'm seeing is that you probably don't.
Right.
Okay.
But this is really good to know. But I'm not hosting through third party. I know when I first opened my website, like
Yeah.
10 or 11 years ago, I was grabbing images off the internet and
Totally.
unknowingly, right?
Well, I know, and this is
that
why.
hasn't been the case for no, 7 or 8 years for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is, anyways,
But that's good to know. Thank you. That's very
absolutely.
good to know.
Yeah, it just doesn't do people any good to grab templates and not understand best practices, not know how to actually comply with the laws. And so that's where, like, my website protection package goes through all of this. It has the education that goes along with how do you post these, how do you achieve constructive notice.
And I do use, like, not so much on my website, but within my training, like through my signature program, there's like a lesson where we go through the map of consciousness from power versus force. When I say this is power versus force, and it's just that map of, the
yeah, you're going to want to, if that's somebody else's content, you're going to want to take that out.
Yeah. Where it's kind of like really well known.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's still theirs. They created it. They were the company or the thought leaders behind that. It, even a well-known framework does not entitle other people to use it and take it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But it's good.
Actually, I think they have where you can purchase there. You can purchase it.
Totally. And a lot of that, I mean, this is the.
And then if anything, it's promoting their book and telling people.
Well, and this is why people do license their content to help get it shared, but the licensing has to be done under their terms, has to be done under certain rules. Usually they're getting paid for, it's how businesses stay in business.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Awesome. Well, good questions.
Well, but you mentioned there was something, maybe it was the DMCA.
I popped the link over into the chat, so you have to hop over.
Was there another document between, other than there was waiver of liability when they purchased the purchase protection, right? Then there's the terms of agreement, the privacy policy, the DMCA. Was there something else?
Yeah,
it might have been DMCA.
Well, the DMCA right now, and I didn't read all the way through your terms of service, but your terms of service are called terms of use and DMCA notice. So your DMCA may be included in there. I didn't look at,
It seems to ring a bell that it is because.
Well, it's titled that way. So I assume it's in there, but it's like I said, it's this big scrolling page and I can't tell the sections apart. So I don't know where it is. But in addition, so terms of use, let's be clear that in my mind, and this is my very strong opinion, but you've got terms that apply to the general use of your website. People that show up and consume content that's freely available and browse your site, right? That's one set of terms.
Or opt in for a gift.
Yeah,
like
and that
join the mail list.
Yeah, join the mail list. But there is something else that happens when somebody purchases from you, right? They get an additional level of access. Usually it's to your intellectual property in some format. Whether it's on your mailing list, whether it's inside of a course, whether it's a paid digital download, whether it's live training with you, you're exposing additional assets inside your business through, this other avenue. It's a little bit like, driving onto a car lot, right? There's going to be general rules that apply when you just go visit a business. But as soon as you purchase something, there should be additional rules that apply to that purchase. Here's our refund policy. Here's what we are and aren't going to be liable for. Here's the ways that you can, in the instance of intellectual property, here's the ways that you can use our information. Here's what you can't do with it. Depending on what you're doing, terms of purchase for my clients usually cover a broad range of things. And especially if they're doing group coaching, if they're running an online forum, if they've got a Facebook group, if they're doing anything that looks like bringing people together, whether it's live or in person, you've got to have a whole bunch of additional language to cover those activities because you now have people that you can't control potentially causing liability for your business, right? So terms of purchase, the way that I create them, also protect people and allow you to remove somebody from your group, kick somebody out of your online forum, delete their content if it's infringing somebody's rights. There's all of these additional protections. Or let's say they jump into your group and do a whole bunch of data scraping. So data scraping is a huge problem these days where somebody, and anybody here who's built any kind of online group knows how much effort that is. Do you want
Right,
somebody
yeah.
coming in and going, oh, I'm going to take a screen grab of all the members in this group and I'm going to go over here and invite them to my group because I do something similar, or I'm going to start, showing ads to them on Facebook or whatever.
But that's what data scraping is?
Yeah, or removing content from inside you. So data scraping can be a whole bunch of things, but usually it's scraping information about who's in the group, contact information, other information from inside the group. So I have a provision that protects against that and says if you do it, you're removed, not only from the group, but from the program. So there's a whole bunch of additional liability issues that most people just don't think about until something goes wrong. And so the terms of purchase, so my stand for businesses is you've got your regular website terms and conditions. These are just the general ground rules that apply to anybody visiting your site. You've got your privacy policy because that's required by law, should be GDPR compliant. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's evolved in the privacy landscape. You've got certain disclaimers depending on what you do, especially if you're in the health and wellness world, especially if you're in any kind of, financial services.
And I'm
world
both, both.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
So the FTC really likes to see an earnings and income disclaimer pulled out and separately posted on your site. And this is so that people are not being conned in to get rich quick schemes or, even if you help somebody in business improve their sales or improve their earnings or be more successful, you're not making claims that are getting you into trouble because people are falsely believing it's going to, make them $1 million this year. So
Yeah.
you need to have an earnings and income disclaimer on its separate footer link attached to your website, available from every page of your website. And then you might have additional disclaimers depending on your work. But the terms of purchase, most people get this wrong. And then what happens is they rely on their general website terms and conditions, which don't address this stuff that's covered inside of the terms of purchase. And then they have somebody that initiates a chargeback request, or somebody that rips off their intellectual property, or somebody that causes some other problem inside their services or their group.
Well, I'm recognizing everything you've said from my terms of purchase. Yeah, the intellectual property piece isn't in it. The rest is, like, I can take photographs, I can use testimony.
But there's a ton, it's a really big document, and there's a ton there when it's done right, and people just don't understand what should be inside of that.
So where should I go for this? Is that something that you could help with?
Yeah, so I've got
from the US, or would I have to take it from you and go to a Canadian?
No, well, I mean, I'll just say from the caveat that I'm not a Canadian lawyer, but I've helped lots of people that are in Canada that do cross-border business. I've got what I would recommend for you, and I'll still make it available because you purchased that other stuff before the end of the year, but I ran a workshop last year that was about half and half. Actually, several workshops, but they had about half Canadians, half US, and I have a set of documents in there that are designed specifically for Canadian clients by province. The thing that's going to vary most for Canadian clients is provincially, your privacy laws are a little bit different. Like the US, you've got a federal privacy law, but your provinces either opt into that federal version or they have their, so it's PIPEDA, or they have PIPA, the Personal Information Protection Act, right? So they've got either a provincial version, or they basically, say we go along with the federal version. So also you have to spell out, you have to specifically identify a privacy officer with your company and provide their contact information. So there are a few differences between Canadian and US law, which is why I've created a Canadian set of documents. But I'll drop you the link because you can still get access to the workshop. It's just the recording of the workshop and then all of the documents that go along with it. These are the same documents that are inside of my website protection package, but the value, I mean, it saves you more than 50% off the standard pricing because I ran it in a workshop format. So I don't share this link broadly, except for people who show up on these calls that are trying to get their websites protected, because I was really happy last year to try to get people online because of COVID. I worked really hard to get people supported. So that last link right there, it's not a link that's accessible from any page on my site. It's a backlink, but you can still go there and see that my website protection package workshop is there. It'll just drop you into a email campaign series that's going to deliver the documents. It's going to give you links to my Facebook group for this workshop. And then as soon as I let you into the group, the recording is there. It's all time stamped. You can go directly to certain sections of the recording. Excuse me.
That's amazing. Thank you.
You're welcome. So that is, I mean, for most people that I serve, like I just start from the standpoint that if you are an entrepreneur and you're doing online business, this is an absolute must-have. Most people teach it wrong. Most documents don't cover everything that you need. And I care a lot that people who I serve, who are honestly producing amazing content and a ton of information, that they actually understand how to protect it the right way.
Yeah, I mean, I do have a level of protection that people can't just teach what I teach by copying it, because it's such a depth, a body of knowledge. But then if they market the surface frameworks well enough, like it's kind of like, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to have similar issues with my products too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Forrest, I invited you because I know you got the website protection package before the holidays. I invited you, or I would think I was watching for your invites into that Facebook group. Did you ever go through and ask to join the group? Because that's where you're going to get access.
Did.
Let me
I
go
thought
look.
I did, although I've been kind of sluggish with the holidays and family and from out of town and so
I
forth. So
get it. I
thanks
know
for
we
pulling my
talked it.
coat.
Yes, you were
Yeah.
traveling, and I just assumed like you'll get to it when you get to it. But I
I thought
wanted
I
to
had
make
done
sure.
it, but I need to check it again. I thought I had done it, but I know I have not visited.
That's
So
okay. Let me
I
go.
should check again.
Because I'd sent you a friend request on Facebook so that I could directly invite you. And that's where I didn't know if you had responded yet, but let me just hop in and look.
Okay.
Because you got both. You got both the website protection package and the affiliate and JV
Yes.
ready upgrade. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So let me just go into members. Okay.
And I do have my samples for you too when you're ready for that.
Oh, got it. Your
For the
questions.
questions,
Okay.
yeah.
Yep. Let me just make sure that you're in here. Give me just a second. Okay, so I'm not able to invite you, which means you haven't accepted my friend request, which my feelings are not hurt, but that will make it easier for me to just drop you in there.
Yeah. Okay.
So just look for me in the friend request. It's just under my name, Heather Pierce Campbell. If you accept that, then I can hop into both groups and invite you into those groups so that you get
Great.
access to those
Okay.
recordings.
I'll do that right after we finish. Yeah.
Sounds good. Go ahead, Errol.
I was going to say that you had mentioned something else that you were going to share with me between the Canadian and, so I don't think it was the WPP workshop. I think it was something to do with the copywriting or the intellectual property that you have.
Yeah, so for trademarks, I mean, just to wrap up that conversation, because you'd asked about pricing, right? Trademarks in the state, I charge $14.97 for a trademark application, single class, right? The fees go up based on, because anytime you add a class, it's additional research, additional languaging, you may have additional office actions to respond to. So in the States, $14.97, and plenty of attorneys that I know charge much more than that, but that for me was a reasonable place to start to launch my trademark registration services. And then the unfortunate part is that the US PTO did just bump up their fee schedule January 2nd. So the filing fees, which are paid separately, did go up by a little bit, but depending on how many classes you're registering, it may or may not be totally relevant, If it's a difference of $75, big whoop. If you're registering in 10 classes, then it adds up, right? Mm-hmm. So, but if you want more information on my registration support, I'm happy to drop a link.
Well, I think there was, I think you mentioned that there was something within, like it was related to the package that I purchased, the business, that you said there was something
so
that you
The business evolution package comes with, and I'm happy to pop the list over here. This
I
is
think I don't know if just around the beginning or middle of our conversation, you said there was something that you have used with your Canadian clients that you'd be willing to share. Do you remember what that was?
Are you just talking about the venue and dispute resolution
that's
clause,
what it
the
was.
multi-step? Yes, I can grab that and email it to you.
If you would, that would be terrific. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I can send you some of that sample language that comes from other contracts, and you're welcome to just plug it in place of those U.S. provisions. Let me just make sure you're in my email here.
Perfect.
It might take a day or two depending on my work, Arrow, but it's on my list, and I'm creating the draft to you right now.
Okay, and I'll make a note to remember what that was so I can actually describe it. So
no, that's all right. So you're talking about venue and jurisdiction, and then the dispute resolution clause, which is going to be a multi-step clause that I recommend.
Good memory.
Well, I'm glad you asked. Arrow, your email doesn't directly come up inside my email account. Remind me what it is.
So I'm going to give you a different one, and
that you can
would be...
pop it into the chat if you just want to type it,
Sure.
and then I'll copy it over.
Sure.
Thank you. All right, Forrest, I know you said you had your other provisions there. If you wanted to review those, I'm happy to. Otherwise, you're welcome to pop onto a future call. I know I heard little voices in the background, which is so fun.
Okay. Yeah, so here's what the original that I took from, Dr. Kurapati, for example, 12 questions. One of them, number one was, after admission, ask the names of your primary hospital doctor and the other specialists who make up your physician team. Your primary hospital physician will coordinate with the team, and your nurses will assist you during your stay. So that's what he had. And then what I had is, number one, ask for the names of your primary hospital treating physician and the names of your specialists. Because they commonly practice in groups, their groups may schedule different physicians to visit you on different days. This can confuse you. By keeping track of your physicians, you can prevent this from interfering with your ability to understand the treatment plan and how you're doing. Be sure to inform your personal primary clinician's office as soon as possible that you are, and have a couple sentences after that.
Well,
so I basically expanded a lot on what he had already,
No, and I get that. And there's going to be certain things that are so obvious, they're just not proprietary. Like that, is one of those. And you could describe it in different ways. But, it's, I guess what I would have you do is separate and apart from his list, sit down and create your own. Like, what order would you put them in? How would you describe them? And just not be working from that. And then if you need to get in and revise your own information, add a few steps, just create it in a way that it's your own, that you're literally not just going, oh, here's steps 1 through 12, here's what they're called, using the same language, right? You just don't want to be directly duplicating anybody's work.
Okay.
But you're going to have the experience. Yeah, you have the experience and the knowledge to understand, probably even, from your own just history, what people should be dealing with, what they should be asking, what order they should approach it in. And so I'd do that first. I'd scrap anything that you have that's based on his work, sit down and create your own. Even if it's just, reorganizing it or putting it in order that makes better sense to you or whatever. It's just really important that we not duplicate other people's. You're welcome.
I prepared it and had it all set to go out, but I'm glad that you grabbed me before it went out.
Totally. Good work. Well, good question.
Well, thank you. Have a nice day then.
You're welcome. We'll connect soon. Bye, Forrest.
Sure. I'm going to go to that, see if I can find your invitation and accept it.
Yeah, perfect. Just in the regular friend request in Facebook. And then once I see that, accept it, I'll hop in and invite you to both those groups so that you get access to the recordings.
Okay, great.
All right. Okay, bye-bye. All righty. Anybody else with questions? Otherwise, goodness, we've got an hour and a half today. Those were some great questions. Jen, I see that you're still on. Or is there anything that I can help you with today? If you're able to unmute, you're welcome to just hit unmute. If not, you can type in the chat. I get it that sometimes people can't go live. Otherwise, good to have you. I'll give you a few more seconds. Hope you guys have a great start. I know this year's already been somewhat tumultuous. It's hard for me as a mom to process the news and manage my life at the same time. It's heavy stuff, but anyways, I'm so glad I showed up and got to connect with folks and offer a little support. I'm going to wish you guys a happy new year and sign off. So if you have any questions, pop on to my future monthly calls. Bye, you guys.
Thank you.
You're
So
welcome.
is this monthly or weekly? I got confused. This is monthly?
It's monthly. Last year it was weekly, but this year I'm consolidating and I'm prioritizing client work. I did a lot of free work and free support last year to get
Okay.
people online.
I just wondered because I read that it said weekly, so I changed it from monthly. So which week are you going to be doing it on?
The second Monday of every month. And no, last year it would have said weekly. This year it's monthly.
Okay, I just wanted to know because I set it up in my calendar so I know.
Awesome. All right.
And
Well, thanks for asking, Kathleen. Have a great
Bye.
have a great week. Okay, bye-bye.